Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to be speaking with composer Missy Mazzoli. First, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Missy Mazzoli. I'm a composer, and I'm talking to you now from my studio in Brooklyn, New York. And I make all different kinds of music. Make a lot of operas and theatrical work, like large scale theatrical work. I also write a lot of orchestral work, chamber music. I had a band for many years that toured around the country and around the world playing my music, and do a little bit for film and TV, which is really fun. So I'm sort of doing a little bit of everything. And I'm a professor at Bard College in upstate New York. And I'm the co-founder of Luna Composition Lab, which is a nonprofit organization that supports female and non-binary composers ages 13 to 18.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So, first, I'd love to follow up by asking about your creative process. So, what's the initial inspiration behind your composition pieces?
Yeah, it's all over the place. I mean,
Hmm.
lately, like I said, I've been writing a lot of opera, so that is all about the story and the drama. And I'm working with a huge team of people. So there's a librettist who's writing the words, a director, set designers, producers. Like there's a whole, literally hundreds of people involved. And with those works, like we select a story first. And then my librettist creates a libretto, and then I make the music for that dramatic um, scene or that dramatic situation. And then with other works, it's all over the place. I have a work called Dark with Excessive Bright, which is started off as a double bass concerto with strings, and that the inspiration for that was really like Renaissance and Baroque music, but filtered through a contemporary lens.
Hmm.
I have an orchestral work, Symphonia, which is sort of constructed in the shape of a solar system. So there are all these loops that combine to form, repeating patterns of different lengths, and the whole piece is itself a big loop. So it's sort of like inspired by the movement of the planets and like little rotations within larger orbits. Um, and yeah, so I'm very inspired by, I'm inspired a lot by human drama and stories about human beings and caught in like weird situations. That's why I think I'm drawn to opera.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. Like how your process can start from, something as concrete as like a story, like something dramatic, but also like some larger cosmic ideas, like in your
Mhm.
orchestral works. Building on that, is there like a specific piece you would want to share the key musical ideas or themes ex you explored?
Yeah, let me think. I do think so. This work, Dark with Excessive Bright, is interesting because it has two versions. So it's a double bass concerto. That was the original version, and then I reworked it to be a violin concerto. And the inspiration with that was really, like I said, like Baroque and Renaissance music, but specifically, I was writing it for a soloist, a double bass soloist who has a double bass that was built in 1580,
Wow.
which is crazy,
Yeah.
that this, and to have anything that's, that old that's still used for its original
Hmm.
purpose.
Yeah.
And with string instruments just sound better and better as they age, which I've always loved. It's so strange. And so and this instrument was like built, out of the wood from a pear tree in Croatia, and then it was kept in Italy for many, many years in a monastery in North Italy. And the monastery was bombed during World War II, but the base survived, and like the monks there kind of kept
Wow.
it in good shape. It has a really
Hmm.
crazy story. And then it ended up in Australia being performed with the Australian Chamber Orchestra, and they were the ones who commissioned me to write this concerto initially. Um, so yeah, it just like I imagined that instrument as a sort of musical storyteller, so that this instrument was like collecting the stories of the world, musical stories, but also just world history in like the grain of its material, and then sort of emerging back into the world in the 21st century and kind of spitting all these stories back out at us. Um, so again, so you have music from like all these different that's reminiscent of all these different eras, but sort of filtered through the lens of someone writing in the 21st century.
Yeah, that's incredible. Wow. That's I've never heard of a instrument that went through like so much of history like that. Yeah, that's amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah, so building on that idea, are there new directions or areas you're interested in exploring next? Maybe whether that be through like collaborations, technologies or like musical concepts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really interested in like doing more work with film and working with different artists and maybe like even installation. And certainly my work in opera is a sort of version of that in a way. It's like it's dramatic storytelling. It's very very collaborative work. So yeah, I kind of I want to do more with filmmakers. And I also would love to just do bigger and bigger operas. I'm writing an opera for the Metropolitan Opera next year, and
Hmm. Wow.
so and that's really big. And I just want to be able to.
Hmm.
I love creating these really really big works.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. Um, wow, wait, can you tell me a little bit more about like that experience with did you say the Met Opera House? Or
Yeah. I mean,
hmm.
so we have it premieres in almost exactly a year, so it will be October of 2026. And the story is an adaptation of a novel called Lincoln in the Bardo
Hmm.
by this writer George Saunders. And so it's kind of follows the story of Abraham Lincoln's son who, passed away when he was 11 after a really short illness. Um, and the book imagines him in the graveyard, sort of caught between life and death. And the graveyard is inhabited by all these ghosts who refuse to admit or accept that they are dead. And so they're all sort of trapped in this limbo. And it's very funny. It's very sad. It's just a really, I think, it's a really great story for the operatic stage. It has a lot of characters, but we haven't really started working on it at the Met yet. We had a
Hmm.
workshop last summer with an orchestra, which is great, but we haven't started working on it in the theater yet.
Sounds really interesting. Yeah. I'm excited to, hear it in like a year now,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Um, so another question, being a composer, what do you think are like the main challenges that composers and performers are dealing with in today's classical scene?
Huh. I mean, some of the challenges have always been there, at being paid enough. Like money is and having, finding, if your goal is like to as a performer is to get an orchestral job, like there aren't that many, and so it's a challenging environment. Um, and so I think some stuff um I think that those issues were present for Beethoven and Mozart, and they're
Right.
present for us as well. But I think that there's actually, I think, more opportunity now than there was when I was in just graduating from college like 20 years ago. Um, People are getting more creative about, what makes a career. There are a lot of different ensembles. It's not like, oh, you have to be in an orchestra or you're not a performer. Or as a composer, it's
Hmm.
like the goal is always you have to get a teaching job, or like that's it, and so but now I think there's a lot more options actually. Um, so yeah, and I think just like there's also, the ever-present issue of just like staying mentally healthy and staying sane.
Right.
And um, I think having a community of people, and finding your community of people is really essential for any classical music performer, any classical music composer. And I think that that's hard right now. I think
Hmm.
people are really like, um, you know, stressed out. They're in their phones a lot. There's this sort of more of a feeling of isolation from each
Right.
other, and that's just like not that's not good. And I think that um, any like I always tell my students like to prioritize finding your community of people because that's what's going to keep you sane and happy and that's what's going to support you through the rough times.
Hmm. Yeah. I know you already talked about like how there's a lot more opportunities
Mhm.
in the present day, but other than that, are there any new trends or directions that make you feel optimistic about like the f future of contemporary classical music?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I just feel like, again, um, you know, it on the one hand, it's frustrating to hear about like budget cuts or, like that the NEA budget is being cut and like, all that
Right.
stuff is very disheartening. But when I think about, again, how things were 20, 25 years ago, um, I think that um, like there was definitely a lot going on with like the new music scene, but like now it's a much more sort of present thing. It's much more like like students who are like undergrads are playing really complicated, contemporary music. And it's more just like sort of part of the fabric. The New York Philharmonic is playing more and more contemporary music. The Met
Right.
Opera is playing more and more contemporary works, and they're really prioritizing contemporary work as a very
Hmm.
vital thing for New York. So I think that like I said, I think that that gives me a lot of hope. Um, and and also like the internet, as much as it is like a sort of dark place a lot of the
Yeah.
time, like it is an amazing way to be connected to each other and
Hmm.
leads to so many opportunities. And it's also led, I think, in the last 20 years to a great like a more of a democratic way, a democratic scene in that you don't need to wait for someone to decide to be your agent or be your publicist. Like you can do that yourself more easily, and you can create your sort of identity and like online that is really yours and is really unique.
Hmm.
Um, so there are pluses to all of that, and also in terms of like finding community around the world. You know, I feel like I could go to any city around the world and like find performers and composers who I'm connected with online. And again, goes back to community, feeling that sense of friendship and belonging and togetherness.
Right. Building on that, what do you think can help make contemporary classical music even more accessible to like wider audiences? Are there particular strategies or initiatives that you found effective?
Yeah, I think that one of the keys is that okay, so people always ask me like, why will people pay like $500 to go see Taylor Swift and won't pay, $20 to go see like an orchestra? And it's like people have a relationship with Taylor Swift. Like they feel, even if you
Right.
don't know her, I don't know her, but like if you don't know her, you feel like you do. We all feel
Hmm.
like we have some sort of relationship with her as a person that's sort of a separate from or like adjacent to the music itself. And I think we need to create a little bit of that with composers too. I think like once people know you as a person, once they know a composer as a person, they're much more open to seeing what they create. And I've seen people, like audience members, become sort of attached to certain composers because they feel like they know them.
Hmm.
So it's really hard to get an audience attached to an idea, and it's much easier to get them attached to a person or a personality. So I think that it means I always say yes to every interview, every like pre-concert talk. I'm like, yes, let me talk to everybody because it's a way of like breaking down the walls when they feel like that oh, this music was written by a human being who's like, you know, living in New York City just like me and who's it's like there's a familiarity there that is very helpful. Um, so I think that that's a big part of it. And that goes for performers too. It's like, people feel like they know like Joshua Bell, like they like as a person
Hmm.
after all these years, or Hilary Hahn, or it's like, and so it's like, how can you be known as a personality in addition to being and obviously it's not as important as the music, but it is like something that's part of getting people to fall in love with you who are strangers.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting because like I mean I go to high school and I
Mhm.
actually take a music class that's called post-romantic music, and
Mhm.
we were talking about listomania and
Uh-huh.
like and then like the romantic era being a lot more about like humans, and we were talking about how that relates to like the present era and how there's like Swiftomania now,
Yeah.
or like even like 40 years ago, 50 years ago there was like Beatlemania, I guess, like just
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
um a lot more centered on humans. And I think you bring up a really good point on like how important that personal connection is. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah,
Mhm.
on that note, I'm curious about how you see technology, especially things like AI, fitting
Mhm.
into the future of composition. I mean, does this risk like taking something as essential like this away from composers that are trying to build stronger connections with audiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a big topic. I think that with the kind of music that I make and that is in a very like small niche.
Hmm.
Contemporary music is still is a relatively small niche kind of thing. Um, and but the goal, people are attracted to it because it's something completely new. And like I feel like every time I'm commissioned to write a work, like the assignment there is to write something that no one's ever heard before. And AI can only be recreative. Like it can't create on its own. It recreates things that are fed to it and remixes things that are fed to it.
Hmm.
And so, if you're asked to, I think it will have a big impact on like film score, film music, um, and like music for TV, things that are not necessarily supposed to be this big artistic statement every time, but they're supposed to
Hmm.
support a narrative, or add a certain color to a scenario. I think that AI might be okay at that. But
Yeah.
for me, I think that it's just not. Um, I use like AI tools to a very limited degree,
Yeah.
um, like in Sibelius, but like it's just like doing things faster that I would have done myself.
Right.
I'm not asking it to create something for me.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen with it. I mean, I really don't, but um, I haven't heard any AI music or created music that I like.
Hmm.
And that's not why I listen to music. Like I listen to music to have a
Right.
connection with people.
Right.
So it's rock music, punk music, whatever. Like I feel like that's the way we connect. And
Hmm.
so I'm not interested in connecting with robots. I'm just not.
Right. Right, right. Yeah. Um, on a completely different topic, I guess. I mean, many young music students, I guess including me too, struggle to either start writing or not writing, but understanding and like playing contemporary classical music. What do you have any advice you would give them as they're trying to find their own voice and like navigating this modern landscape that they're not used to?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that, I mean, my experience, we was that I was not when I was younger, I played piano just, like a lot of other kids, and I was not really interested in really modern music at first because it just felt completely unfamiliar to me. And then little by little, I really became interested in it, and it was sort of like easing into it. So composers like Stravinsky, I fell in love with like the ballets, The Rite of Spring, Petrushka, and then it felt like I was like, oh, this person's doing something really new, but it's in a language that I understand, like their chords I can analyze and like, so I think that like easing into it with that, you don't need to be playing like Schoenberg or Matthias Pincher right away. It's like, you can sort of
Right.
like work your way into things that are more familiar and like ask your teachers for things that are maybe adjacent to things that
Hmm.
you like. Also, but composers like contemporary music is not a monolith. It's not like
Right.
everyone's writing this way.
Right.
It's very different from like the classical era where there was like a style that people wrote in. Um, now composers are writing all sorts of things, and there's some composers writing very tonal things, some composers writing using noise as a tool. Like it's really this huge spectrum. So I definitely think that like there's something to like in there, and so it's about just doing your research and finding the contemporary composers that you like. Um, and
Mhm.
it's also okay not to like some stuff, you know? Like there's
Yeah.
some composers that I'm just not a fan of, and I've never quite felt like I understood what they're going for, and that's fine. That's just taste. It's crazy to think that you would love
Right.
everything just because for a
Yes.
certain instrument.
Yes. On that note, do you have any composers in mind who you think were underrepresented and should be remembered?
Um, I mean, I feel like the first people who are coming to mind, I mean, there were a lot of women who were really overlooked, who I can only assume because they were women, because they were writing music that was really amazing. I think someone like Meredith Monk, is she has a lot of recognition, but she's often described as like something different than a composer. It's like, oh, she's a composer performer, or she's a performance artist, and it's like she's a brilliant composer, and like I am always pushing for her to be recognized as a composer. I mean, her string quartets are gorgeous, her operas are amazing. Like she's doing really innovative things, and she's like 83 now. Um, Let me think. I also feel um, there's a Canadian woman named Anne Southam. So Southam is her last name. And her music is also really beautiful. She has these really beautiful piano works they sort of are reminiscent of minimalism, but there's something else there that's really uniquely hers. So I would name those two people.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. Really interested learning about your journey, and I'm sure our watchers at home will enjoy it too. Thank you.
Thank you.